By the time the afternoon train vanished east of Copper Junction, Adelaide Monroe had 26 cents, a cracked leather valise, and a letter offering her a teaching position at a schoolhouse that had burned to the ground 3 weeks earlier. She stood beneath the depot awning, while Montana wind lifted strands of dark hair from beneath her hat and sent dry dust skittering across the empty street. At 25, Adelaide was young enough that strangers still called her girl, though the last 2 years had taught her enough about disappointment to make her feel much older. The station master had been apologetic. The school board had forgotten to write. The town had no money for another teacher. The next train east would not come for 4 days, and a room at the hotel cost more than Adelaide possessed. She had been considering whether 26 cents would buy enough bread to last until morning when a man's voice came from the loading platform beside the freight office. "That's not right." Adelaide looked over. A rancher stood beside a wagon loaded with flour, lamp oil, harness leather, and sacks of grain. He was tall, somewhere near 40, with sun-browned skin and a worn gray hat pulled low over serious eyes. Beside him, a young freight clerk was adding figures on an invoice. The clerk tapped the paper impatiently. 14 sacks at $1.80. "There are 11 sacks," the rancher said. 14 were ordered. 11 were delivered. "Then take it up with Helena." The rancher's jaw tightened. Adelaide should have minded her own business. Instead, she looked at the invoice. Then she looked at the numbers written on the crate beside the wagon. "You've charged him twice for the 3 sacks that never left Bozeman." Both men turned. The freight clerk frowned. "Beg pardon?" Adelaide stepped closer and pointed to a notation in blue pencil. "Those 3 were marked short at transfer. See the letters S.T. Short transfer." Someone carried the original quantity into the final bill without subtracting the shortage. The clerk snatched up the paper. The rancher studied Adelaide. She was aware of how she must look dust on the hem of her traveling dress, one glove mended at the thumb, a valise that had seen better decades. But there was nothing uncertain in her expression. The clerk disappeared into the freight office. A minute later, he returned with a corrected invoice and considerably less confidence. The rancher paid. Then he turned toward Adelaide. "Can you keep books?" The question was so abrupt that she almost laughed. "Better than your freight company can." For the first time, something changed in his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "My name is Caleb Ward," he said. "I own Red Willow Ranch." Adelaide Monroe. "Miss Monroe, the man who kept my accounts left for Oregon last month. I've been doing them myself. That explains the 14 sacks." This time Caleb did smile. It transformed him. For one instant, he looked less like a man carved from fence post and weathered stone, and more like someone who remembered how to enjoy being alive. "I need someone for 30 days, he said. "Maybe longer if the work suits us both. Room, meals, and $20 for the month." $20. Adelaide thought of the burned schoolhouse, the 4 days until the next train, the 26 cents in her purse. But pride still required one question. What exactly would I be doing? Keeping me from paying for things I never received would be a start. She looked toward the wagon. "How far is the ranch?" 8 miles. He followed her glance and understood before she asked. "You can ride in the wagon." "I didn't ask." "No, ma'am. I'm offering." There was no pity in his voice. That decided her. Adelaide picked up her valise. "Then I'll work for 30 days. Caleb took the valise from her, but only after she handed it to him. That decided something for him, too. Red Willow Ranch lay in a broad valley where the mountains rose blue and purple beyond miles of bunchgrass. The ranch house was larger than Adelaide expected, built of timber and river stone, with cottonwoods shading one side and a long porch facing west. It was not neglected, but it was tired. So was everyone in it. A 9-year-old girl named Ruth Ward watched Adelaide arrive from behind the porch railing, suspicious and silent. Ruth was Caleb's niece. Her mother, Caleb's younger sister, had died 2 winters earlier, and her father had never returned from a mining camp in Idaho. Caleb had taken the child in without hesitation. He had also discovered that knowing how to raise horses did not mean knowing how to raise a grieving little girl. Ruth had not attended school in nearly a year, she reads. Caleb explained that evening. When she chooses. And when does she choose? Rarely. Ruth, who was sitting at the far end of the table, glared at him. Adelaide hid a smile. The ranch cook, a broad-shouldered widow named Mrs. Beasley, served beef, potatoes, and sourdough biscuits. 8 ranch hands ate at a separate table in the bunkhouse, though Adelaide noticed Caleb carried one plate outside to an older worker whose injured knee kept him from walking comfortably. He did not mention it. Adelaide did not mention that she had noticed. After supper, Caleb showed her the ranch office. It occupied a narrow room beside the parlor. Adelaide stopped in the doorway. Receipts were stuffed into jars. Letters lay beneath horseshoe catalogs. Payroll figures had been written on the backs of seed advertisements. 3 ledgers sat on the floor beneath a broken chair. A dead moth rested in the ink bottle. Caleb cleared his throat. I know where most things are. I'm sure you believe that. I do. That's the problem. He leaned against the doorframe. What would you need? A table that doesn't wobble. 2 boxes. String. Labels. A fresh ledger. And nobody touches anything in this room for 3 days. I own the room. For the next 30 days, you may visit by appointment. Caleb stared at her. Then that almost smile returned. Yes, ma'am. By the end of the first week, Adelaide understood 2 things. The first was that Caleb Ward was an excellent rancher. The second was that he should never again be permitted to manage a ledger without supervision. He knew every horse on Red Willow by gait, temperament, bloodline, and scar. He could look at clouds above the western ridge and predict rain within an hour. He could calm a frightened colt with one hand on its neck. But numbers bored him. Paper irritated him. And letters from businessmen in Helena had a way of disappearing beneath saddle catalogs until they became urgent. Adelaide created order. She separated ranch expenses from household expenses. She discovered that 2 workers had been accidentally underpaid in June and made Caleb correct it immediately. He did. She found 3 bills that had already been paid. She found another that should never have been paid at all. She wrote to a supplier about missing fence wire and received a credit within a week. By the 10th day, Caleb had stopped asking why she needed to see a document. He simply brought it. That trust came quietly. So did everything else between them. Adelaide began each morning in the office after breakfast. Ruth often appeared at the door, pretending she had come to look for something. What are you doing? The girl asked one morning. Finding out why your uncle bought 6 barrels of nails in February. He builds fences. No man builds this many fences. Ruth edged closer. Adelaide showed her a column of figures. Can you add those? Ruth shrugged. Probably. Then prove it. 5 minutes later, Ruth had found Adelaide's deliberately planted mistake. The next morning, she returned with a pencil of her own. Caleb noticed. He said, nothing. But that afternoon, a small wooden writing desk appeared beneath the office window. Adelaide found him repairing a harness in the barn. Did you put that desk in my office? Our office. He corrected. Who made it? I did. The workmanship was simple and sturdy, like the man. Thank you. He kept working. Ruth needs somewhere to sit. Of course. And you were using a flower crate. So this has nothing to do with me? He glanced at her. Very little. Adelaide smiled all the way back to the house. The ranch revealed Caleb to her slowly. He was not a talkative man, but neither was he empty. He carved small animals from scrap wood when he could not sleep. He played the fiddle badly on Sunday evenings and knew he played it badly. He kept an old mare named Clover because she had belonged to Ruth's mother, though the animal had not worked in years. Whenever money was short, the ranch hands were paid before he was. And every Thursday afternoon, no matter how much work waited, Caleb spent 1 hour teaching Ruth to ride. Adelaide began to see the shape of him. His flaw was not coldness. It was the belief that love meant carrying every burden alone. He had buried a sister, lost a brother-in-law, inherited a grieving child, and kept 24 people depending on Red Willow for wages. Somewhere along the way, he had decided that asking for help was a form of failure. Adelaide understood the habit better than she wanted to. Her own father had been a telegraph operator and occasional schoolmaster who had moved from town to town chasing better wages. After his death, Adelaide had spent 2 years working in railroad offices, reading freight manifests, balancing accounts, and sending messages for men who assumed the pretty young woman behind the desk could not possibly understand their business. She had learned to let them assume. Then, she had learned to charge them for their mistakes. At Red Willow, nobody treated her intelligence like an inconvenience. That was new. By September, the ranch office ran with the precision of a station clock. Ruth was reading every evening. Mrs. Beasley had discovered that Adelaide could make peach preserves and surrendered one corner of her kitchen to the effort. The ranch hands had begun coming to Adelaide when they wanted letters written home. One wanted to tell his mother in Ohio that he had stopped drinking. Another wanted to ask a girl in Kansas if she might still remember him. Adelaide wrote what they could not. In return, they started leaving small things on her desk. A polished stone, a blue feather, a handful of late wildflowers in an old medicine bottle. By the end of the month, Adelaide realized she had become part of the rhythm of Red Willow without noticing when it happened. The realization frightened her. Her 30 days were nearly over. One evening she found Caleb on the back porch repairing a bridle while Ruth practiced multiplication inside. "I suppose you'll be leaving next week," he said. Adelaide looked toward the mountains. That was the arrangement. Caleb pulled the leather strap through the buckle. "Do you want to?" She had expected him to ask whether she planned to, not whether she wanted to. "No," she admitted. His hands stopped, only for a second. "I could use a permanent bookkeeper." "Could you?" Desperately. "That's a compelling offer. I'll raise the wage." Now it's becoming interesting. He looked at her then. The evening light caught the fine lines beside his eyes. "Stay through winter," he said. There was more in the request than work, though neither of them was ready to name it. Adelaide folded her hands in her lap. "All right." Something in Caleb eased. Then a rider appeared at the far edge of the yard. He was dressed too well for ranch work. His horse was expensive. The smile on his face belonged to a man arriving with bad news for someone else. His name was Victor Hale. Adelaide disliked him before he stepped onto the porch. Hale represented the Montana Land and Water Company, a private concern that had been buying creek access, irrigation channels, and grazing rights throughout the territory. He removed his gloves finger by finger. "Caleb Ward." "Hale, I believe you received our notices." Caleb's expression changed. Adelaide saw it immediately. He knew this man. More importantly, he feared what the man had come to say. "What notices?" she asked. Hale glanced at her. "Private business." Adelaide rose. Caleb spoke before she could leave. "She keeps the ranch accounts." That single sentence changed the room. Not a cook, not a guest, not a woman who happened to be nearby. She keeps the ranch accounts. Hale's smile thinned. "Then perhaps she can explain why Red Willow has failed to pay 3 years of maintenance assessments on the North Ditch." Adelaide looked at Caleb. "I've never seen those charges." "Because I never agreed to them," Caleb said. Hale opened a leather case and removed several documents. The Land and Water Company acquired controlling rights to North Ditch in 1885. Every property receiving water from that channel is responsible for annual maintenance. Our ranch was using that ditch before your company existed. That may be your recollection. It's fact. Then I'm sure you can prove it. Hale placed a notice on the table. Adelaide read it twice. Her stomach tightened. The amount was large enough to hurt, but the final paragraph was worse. If payment was not made within 12 days, the company intended to close the head gate, feeding the lower pastures. Red Willow's horses depended on those pastures. Autumn had been unusually dry. The creek was already low. Without the ditch, Caleb would have to move or sell most of the herd before winter. Hale looked around the house as though he had already purchased it. Naturally, the company prefers an amicable solution. Caleb's voice was flat. "Meaning?" We might purchase the south half of Red Willow, enough to satisfy the assessments and eliminate future disagreement. The south half contains the spring pasture. I'm aware. Caleb stood. No. Hale put on his gloves. You have 12 days. After he left, silence filled the room. Ruth had been listening from the stairs. Mrs. Beasley stood in the kitchen doorway. Caleb gathered the papers. I'll handle it. Adelaide looked at him. How? I'll find the money. You don't owe the money if the claim is false. That's a large if. Then we'll make it smaller. He looked tired suddenly. Older. You don't understand these people, Addie. It was the first time he had shortened her name, she noticed. So did he. They have lawyers, he continued. Surveyors. Men sitting in offices who can lose a piece of paper and change where a river belongs. And you have records. Not enough. How do you know? Because my father filed the original water notice at the county courthouse. That section of the building burned in '79. Adelaide looked again at Hale's documents. When did your family begin using North Ditch? Before I was born, early '70s. And Hale's company claims priority from 1,885. Claims they bought an older right. From whom? Caleb hesitated. That's what I don't know. Adelaide took the papers. Then, that's what I'll find out. For the next 4 days, she barely left the office. She read every deed, tax receipt, freight invoice, cattle contract, and scrap of correspondence she could find. Caleb brought boxes down from the attic. Ruth sorted papers by year, even Mrs. Beasley contributed a bundle of letters she had once rescued from a leaking storeroom. Adelaide found references to the ditch. Plenty of them, but nothing strong enough. On the 5th morning, Caleb drove her to the county seat. He offered to come inside the records office. She shook her head. I know how to argue with clerks. I don't doubt it. I may need several hours. I'll wait. You don't have to. I know. He waited anyway. Adelaide spent the day reading brittle documents beneath a dusty window. By late afternoon, her eyes burned. The result was devastatingly simple. Victor Hale's company had a recorded claim. Red Willow did not. Whatever Caleb's father had filed before the courthouse fire was gone. The surviving county records could not prove the ranch had the older right. Adelaide walked outside into cold rain. Caleb was waiting beneath the awning across the street. He saw her face. No luck. She shook her head. For the first time since arriving at Red Willow, Adelaide felt useless. I thought I could fix it. Caleb stepped closer. You found the truth. The truth may cost you half the ranch. Then we'll face that truth. She looked at him sharply. You can't surrender the spring pasture. I didn't say I would. What will you do? Sell horses. Maybe lease winter range south of here. At what cost? Too much. She hated the calmness in his voice. Not because he was calm, because she understood it now. It was the voice of a man preparing to sacrifice everything without asking anyone to stand beside him. You're doing it again, she said. Doing what? Deciding alone. His expression hardened. It's my ranch, and Ruth's home, Mrs. Beasley's livelihood, the hands' wages. I know exactly what's at stake. Then stop behaving as though you're the only one allowed to care. The words landed harder than she intended. Caleb stared at her. Rain hammered the wooden awning. Adelaide immediately regretted the anger, but not the truth. His voice was quieter when he answered. I don't know how to do this any other way. That silenced her. For once, Caleb had not hidden behind practicality. He had admitted something. Adelaide's anger softened. Then learn. They rode home through rain. Neither spoke much. But when the wagon reached a muddy stretch, Caleb handed her the reins while he climbed down to free a wheel. He did not ask whether she knew how. He trusted her. That night, Adelaide could not sleep. She went downstairs and lit a lamp in the office. Ruth's school papers lay stacked neatly beside the ranch ledgers. Adelaide opened one absent-mindedly. It was a history exercise. Ruth had written about Red Willow. My grandfather built the first water gate with iron that came all the way from St. Louis. Adelaide stopped. She read the sentence again. Then she climbed the stairs, two at a time. Caleb opened his bedroom door holding a lamp. His hair was disordered, his expression alarmed. What happened? Where did Ruth learn about the Iron Gate? What? The first water gate. Iron from St. Louis. He rubbed a hand over his face. My father told us the story when we were children. How did the iron get here? Freight, I suppose. From where? Fort Benton, maybe. Adelaide was already turning away. Addie. She looked back. For the first time in days, hope was rising too quickly for caution. Freight companies keep records. At dawn, they were on the road again. But the answer did not come easily. The freight office at Copper Junction had records only from 1,880 onward. The older company had closed years before. The station master remembered that its abandoned storage building had been sold to a blacksmith. The blacksmith remembered buying several wooden cabinets filled with useless paper. Most had been burned for kindling. One cabinet remained in his loft because it was too heavy to move. Adelaide climbed a ladder herself. Caleb followed. Dust coated everything. She searched for 3 hours. Nothing. Then Caleb found a ledger wedged behind the cabinet. Its cover had been damaged by mice. Adelaide opened it carefully. Her finger traveled down columns of faded ink, then stopped. Ward, Samuel, Red Willow, 1 iron sluice gate, 300 feet chain, 2 crates tools, freight paid. The 17th of April, 1872. Adelaide stared at the line. Caleb did not understand at first. Then he did. His father had purchased the equipment for North Ditch 13 years before Hale's company claimed control. But Adelaide was not smiling yet. This proves your father bought a gate. Isn't that enough? Not by itself. Caleb's hope faded. We need to prove where he put it. I can do that. She looked at him. How? For the first time since Hale arrived, Caleb smiled with certainty. Because it's still there. They rode north that afternoon. The old headgate had not been used in years. A newer wooden structure stood farther downstream. But Caleb led Adelaide through brush along an abandoned section of ditch. Near a bend in the creek, half buried beneath mud and willow roots, iron showed through the earth. Caleb knelt and scraped away soil. There it was, a rusted gate. Stamped into the metal were 3 letters from the St. Louis foundry named in the freight ledger. Adelaide laughed. She could not help herself. Caleb looked up at her. Rain had darkened his hair. Mud covered his hands. For the first time, she reached for him without thinking. She caught his face between both palms and kissed his cheek. The moment she realized what she had done, she froze. So did Caleb. Adelaide lowered her hands. I was excited. I noticed. About the gate. Naturally. He was trying not to smile. She turned away. We should bring witnesses. Immediately. And photographs, if we can find someone with a camera. Of course. And the freight ledger. Addie. She looked back. His expression had changed. The humor remained. But something warmer lived beneath it. Thank you. She shook her head. Not yet. They still had to win. The hearing was held 3 days later in the county courthouse. Victor Hale arrived with an attorney. Caleb arrived with Adelaide, 2 longtime ranch hands, the blacksmith, the freight ledger, photographs of the iron gate, and an elderly former ditch worker who remembered helping Samuel Ward install it 16 years earlier. Hale's attorney argued. Adelaide answered with dates. He questioned the freight ledger. The blacksmith explained where it had been found. He questioned the gate. The foundry stamp matched the shipment. He questioned whether the old ditch had actually carried water. The former worker laughed. Carried enough to flood Caleb's mother's garden every spring. Even the commissioner smiled. But the final blow came from Caleb. He unfolded a hand-drawn map his father had taught him to read as a boy. He walked the commissioner through the land not as lines on paper, but as ground he knew. The cottonwood bend, the shale ridge, the old gate, the abandoned ditch, the lower meadow. Adelaide watched him speak and understood something she had nearly missed. She could read documents. Caleb could read land. Neither form of knowledge was enough alone. Together, they told the whole truth. The commissioner ruled that Red Willow had established continuous prior use long before the land and water companies claimed right. The assessments were invalid. The head gate could not be closed. Victor Hale left the courthouse without shaking anyone's hand. Outside, Caleb stood beneath the bright October sky, almost motionless. Adelaide waited. Finally, he exhaled. "You did it. We did it. You found the record. You found the gate. You knew what the record meant. You knew where the water went." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "We did it." That mattered more to Adelaide than she expected. When they returned to Red Willow, the entire ranch was waiting. Mrs. Beasley had somehow produced enough food for 20 people. Tables had been carried into the yard. Lanterns hung from the porch. The ranch hands had washed the dust from their faces and put on clean shirts. Ruth ran toward the wagon before it stopped. "Did we win?" Caleb climbed down. "We won." The cheer could probably be heard in Copper Junction. That evening, everyone ate together. Not ranch owner at one table and workers somewhere else. Everyone. Mrs. Beasley's roast beef disappeared. So did 3 pies. Someone found Caleb's fiddle. His playing was still terrible. Nobody cared. Ruth danced with one of the older ranch hands. Adelaide sat beneath the lantern light and looked at the faces around the table. 30 days earlier, she had arrived in Montana with 26 cents and nowhere to go. Now men who had once been strangers were arguing over who deserved the last piece of pie. Ruth had fallen asleep with her head against Adelaide's shoulder. Caleb sat across from her. He was not looking at the celebration. He was looking at her. Later, after everyone had gone, they stood on the porch. The valley was dark except for moonlight shining on the creek. "My 30 days ended a while ago," Adelaide said. "I noticed. And winter is coming." "I noticed that too." She glanced at him. "You're becoming observant. Your influence." The humor faded from his face. "Addie, I want to offer you something." She waited. "A share of Red Willow." She blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Not as payment for saving it. You've earned every wage I owe you and then some." "Caleb, listen." She did. "I've spent years believing that being responsible for people meant never depending on them. I was wrong. This ranch is stronger because you're here. Ruth is happier. The accounts make sense for the first time since Lincoln was president." "Caleb, possibly an exaggeration. Possibly. I want you to stay as business manager. With a percentage of profits, your decisions carry the same weight as mine in the office." Adelaide studied him. It was not the proposal some women might have expected beneath moonlight. It was better. He was not asking her to remain because he needed comfort. He was recognizing her work, her mind, her place. 10%, she said. His eyebrows rose. "I was thinking 5. Then you've learned nothing from keeping me around. 7, 10, 8, 9. And you never again sign a freight contract without showing it to me." Caleb held out his hand. "Agreed." Adelaide shook it. Neither released the other immediately. Months passed. Winter covered Red Willow in white. Adelaide remained. She and Caleb worked side by side. He taught her to judge the temperament of a horse before touching the reins. She taught him that unopened mail did not become less dangerous with age. Ruth finished 2 school books before spring. On Sundays, Caleb played the fiddle. Adelaide learned to recognize 3 songs despite his best efforts to disguise them. Their affection grew in ordinary moments. Coffee before dawn. A lamp left burning when one returned late. A blanket placed over sleeping Ruth. Arguments about expenses. Laughter after the arguments. Neither rushed. They had both learned what happened when life changed without warning, so they built carefully. In April, Adelaide received a letter from a school board in Wyoming offering her a teaching position. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it on Caleb's desk. He said nothing for a long time. "When would you leave?" "They want someone in June." He nodded. His face became unreadable. Adelaide felt a sharp disappointment. "Is that all you're going to say?" "What should I say?" Anything honest would be refreshing. Caleb stood. He walked to the window. When he turned back, the old habit of silence was gone. I want you to stay. For the ranch? For me. The room became very still. Caleb came closer. I've been trying to find the proper time to tell you. There isn't one. I know that now. You're learning. Slowly, he took her hand. Addie, when you came here, I thought I needed someone to organize papers. Then, I thought I needed you because you were helping Ruth. Then because you saved Red Willow. His thumb brushed lightly across her fingers. But somewhere along the way, I began waiting for the sound of your step in the hall. I began wanting to hear what you thought before I decided anything important. When something good happens, you're the first person I want to tell. When something goes wrong, you're the person I want beside me. Adelaide's eyes filled. Caleb continued. I don't want you to give up teaching because I ask. I don't want you to stay because you think you owe this place anything. He reached into his pocket. A small ring rested in his palm. I want you to choose me. And if you do, I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful you did. Adelaide looked at the ring. Then, at him. What about the school? We'll build one. She laughed through her tears. Caleb Ward, that is the most expensive answer you could possibly have given. I've been told I'm poor with numbers. She kissed him before he could say anything else. They married in June. The ceremony took place beneath the cottonwoods beside the ranch house. Ruth carried wildflowers. Mrs. Beasley cried before anyone else. Every ranch hand wore a clean shirt. Caleb attempted to play the fiddle afterward until Adelaide took it away from him for the safety of the guests. By September, a one-room schoolhouse stood on a rise above Red Willow Creek. At first, there were 6 children, then 9, then 14. Children rode in from neighboring homesteads. A ranch hand's daughter learned to read there. So did the son of the blacksmith who had saved the old freight ledger instead of burning it. Adelaide taught mornings and managed the ranch accounts in the afternoons. Caleb complained that she worked too much. She pointed out that he had once checked fence lines in a blizzard with a fever. Their arguments remained evenly matched. 7 years later, Red Willow looked different from the ranch Adelaide had first seen. The herd had grown. The old ditch had been rebuilt in stone. The schoolhouse had 2 rooms and a second teacher. The ranch office had proper cabinets, none of which contained receipts inside jars. On a September evening, a long table stood beneath the cottonwoods. Workers, neighbors, children, and family crowded around it. Ruth, now 16, sat with 3 younger children, helping the smallest read a storybook aloud. Caleb stood near the porch, holding a dark-haired little girl of 4, who had inherited Adelaide's eyes and his stubbornness. Their 6-year-old son was attempting to climb a tree despite repeated instructions from every adult present. Adelaide stepped from the house carrying a ledger. Caleb groaned. No, she smiled. You don't even know what I'm going to say. You're holding a ledger at supper. We had our best quarter in 5 years. Then put it away. There's more. He narrowed his eyes. How much more? We can afford the new barn. Caleb looked toward the workers, then toward the schoolhouse, then back at his wife. Are you certain? Adelaide pretended to be offended. Have I ever been wrong about the accounts? Once. When? You said we couldn't afford the school. We couldn't. We built it anyway. And ate beans for 3 months. Worth it. Adelaide closed the ledger. Yes. Caleb kissed her forehead. Worth it. Across the yard, Ruth called for everyone to sit down. The table filled. Plates passed from hand to hand. Someone laughed. A child spilled milk. Mrs. Beasley, older now but still unwilling to surrender authority over the kitchen, scolded 3 grown men at once. The evening sun lowered behind the Montana mountains, turning the valley gold. Adelaide looked toward the creek. Somewhere beneath the rebuilt stone headgate, the old iron gate still rested in the earth, rusting, useless now. But she could never bring herself to have it removed. It reminded her of something she had learned at Red Willow. Things were often judged too quickly. An old gate could become evidence. A box of forgotten papers could save a home. A silent man could hold more tenderness than anyone suspected. A frightened child could become a confident young woman, and a girl stepping off a train with 26 cents might not be at the end of her road at all. She might simply be standing at the beginning of a life she had not yet learned to imagine. Caleb followed her gaze, thinking about the ditch. No. The school? No. He waited. Adelaide smiled. I was thinking about the day we met. The freight bill. 14 sacks. 11 sacks. You would have paid for all 14. Probably. You were helpless. Caleb laughed. Completely. She leaned closer. Do you remember what you asked me? His expression softened. Can you keep books? And I should have charged you twice as much. I gave you 9% of my ranch. Our ranch. Caleb nodded. Our ranch. Their daughter called for him from the table. Their son had finally fallen from the tree and was insisting he had meant to do it. Ruth was laughing. The supper was getting cold. Caleb offered Adelaide his arm. She took it. Together, they walked back toward the long table, toward the family and friends waiting beneath the cottonwoods, toward the house that had become theirs through work, disagreement, trust, and thousands of ordinary days. Neither of them had saved Red Willow alone. That was the truth Adelaide valued most. She had brought order to the papers Caleb could not understand. He had shown her the land no document could explain. She had taught him to share the weight. He had given her a place where her intelligence was never something she needed to hide. And between those two strengths, something greater than either of them had taken root. Not charity, not rescue, not luck, a partnership. The kind built slowly enough to last. Sometimes the right life begins with a small chance and the courage to accept it. Adelaide and Caleb found that real strength was not carrying every burden alone, but trusting each other's gifts and building something side by side. When we value people for what they can become, share the weight, and stay open to unexpected beginnings, even a hard road can lead us home. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI for your entertainment, while also sharing a positive lesson about trust, resilience, and partnership.